All right, I mean, am I done with my rant? Should I go on for more? Should I keep on ranting, and raving? Should I knock things off the table? Break some fine china? I don't have any fine china. And I'm not going to go to China to break anything either. Hey! Rimshot. So anyway, so in general, let's talk about the head coach and who the head coach of the United States team should be. And the answer, of course, we don't know. Because we can look at examples or examples of foreign coaches in foreign lands. Now, most African nations end up with their best performances under, generally speaking, either a French, a Belgian, or a German coach. Those are the coaches that seem to relate better to their culture. Most of them, of course, Belgian or French, can speak the language. Some coaches do well temporarily, some do well permanently. Fabio Capello did well with Russia, did well with England, up to a point. The main argument against Fabio Capello in Russia was that Fabio Capello taught an English style, yeah, because Capello is such an English name, because Capello taught an Italian style to a Russian team that wasn't suitable for his style of play. They were very regimented, they were very organized. That's not Russia. Russia is running, full court, back and forth, being attack-minded, the way they play under goose hitting. And Fabio Capello, of course, a totally different coach than goose hitting. So they went to the World Cup, the goalkeeper made some mistakes, and they went home. Didn't get out of the group stage. Then they lost a couple of more games. They paid him off like $20 million to say, hey, sayonara. That's goodbye in Italian. So who should the U.S. hire? Whom should Sunil Gulati hire? Well, they obviously have a lot of money because they made a lot of money off the Copa Centenario and they have a lot more money remaining still in the coffers. So, and then of course they're making so much money off touring Mexican team, they can pretty much hire a really, really big foreign coach. A really big foreign coach may not be the answer because most of those want to impose their style on American players. When Klinsmann came in, he wanted to be proactive. Well, it's fine, you can be proactive, when you have, German players, when you have Italian, when you have Brazilians. You can't really be proactive when players can't trap the ball. And so, and additionally, when Klinsmann came to the United States, he came in under the influence of Martin Vasquez, who was even more incompetent at his job than Klinsmann was at his. Vasquez drilled an idea into Klinsmann's head that the main way to bring U.S. up to the world power is to bring in more Mexican players. Of course, the Mexican players, there were U.S. Mexican players that were plying their trade at Liga MX, were the best players in the Mexican league. So, if you're going against Mexico, they can bring, 10, 15 best players from the Mexican league plus 10, 15 from Europe. When you bring out American players out of Mexico, you bring out the worst, well, not, the bench warmers, like Jose Torres or, who was that guy? Ventura Alvarado, that's the guy. So anyway, so you bring out not a very high caliber of players from Mexico. Furthermore, the Mexican style doesn't really match with the American style. Mexican style is sort of, very short passing and kind of slow developing, at least up to recently. And depending upon pretty decent skill from individual players, where in America you don't have that. So it took Klinsmann about 2 years, really almost 3 years, 2.5 years, up until the spring of 2014 to realize that he was sold a bill of goods, that Martin Vasquez was simply incompetent. So then Klinsmann made the best move of his career, something that slipped the idiots in the American media. He fired Vasquez and he brought in Bertie Vogts. Now Bertie Vogts was, in his prime, a great fullback, a great German fullback, a great international fullback, 2 times West German Player of the Year, which is pretty impressive for right fullback position in the heyday of German soccer, which was 1970s with Müller and Beckenbauer and Netzer and Sepp Maier and those guys. And then, of course, Bertie Vogts became a fairly successful German coach, took him to the Euro finals in 92, won the Euros 96. So Klinsmann finally brings in the master tactician. Now, and Barry Folks may not be the greatest tactician who ever lived, but he's the guy, almost 7 years old, been in the game for over 50 years, been coached by some great coaches like Hannes Weisweiler and Udo Lattek, and of course Helmut Schön and I think he retired before Jupp Derwel took over. So that was the move. That's what's allowed the U.S. to perform so well at the 2014 World Cup. That's what allowed the U.S. to get out of the group of death in second place, but they got out of it. They got into the next round. Now compared to Bruce Arena's performance at the group of death in 2006, where they got destroyed, they got 1 point, and that was and they got one own goal, and they scored. Dempsey scored the other. So if you compare performances, Klinsmann had done really well, and if you compare Klinsmann's performance in 2016 Copa Centenario, he got into semifinals against a very strong field, where Copa Centenario is probably the second most talented roster, group of rosters next to the World Cup, because you have all of South America and you have the best teams out of CONCACAF. So that's a pretty decent size, pretty decent group of players. And Klinsmann got into semifinal. Bruce Arena probably, couldn't have gotten to semifinals. We'll never know. My point is that Jürgen Klinsmann earned enough reputation to be given a little more rope. Yeah, they started off the qualifying poorly. They should have gotten a tie against Mexico at home. Remember, Mexico, even though they kept losing 2-0, 2-0, 2-0, 2-0, it was a different team. It's a different team now under Sorda. They were under Chepo de la Torre, or they were under all the previous crappy coaches that they had in another year. So this is a different team. Also, this Mexican team is now stocked fully, or can be stocked fully, with European-based players. Now, some, of course, coming to America because now it's a MLS motto to overpay Mexican players, and not just U.S. players. But the Mexican team is an experience, and the pedigree of their participants is a much better team now than it was 10, 15 years ago. U.S. is kind of drifting there, but when you're standing, they're all lined by Satchel Paige. When you're standing in place, somebody else is gaining on you. And so somebody else was gaining in the United States. When Klinsmann took the job, he expected most of the players to keep following the Dempseys and occasionally Donovans and Howard and Guzan to Europe, which is their finishing school. You can be talented, you can be even tactically astute and intelligent and hardworking, but the final mastery of one's game happens in the better league, in really the best leagues. You got to go to Germany, you got to go to England if you can get there. And that was Klinsmann's expectations, that the players will keep following, the previous, from Casey Keller to John Harris to Bocanegra and Dempsey, and go to Europe. And that's and he's going to be able to pull a team full of European pros. In reality, MLS began to bring American players back from Europe to MLS. But that wasn't enough. They began to overpay, potentially talented players who needed finishing. They kept overpaying them to stay in MLS. And MLS, to me, is, third, fourth tier Europe, in quality for, by European standards, somewhere around, Denmark, maybe not quite as good Denmark, probably a little better than Serbia. It's not as good as Mexico, and Mexico, certainly is not as good as top, 10 European leagues. And so what we see on average is that Klinsmann came in with one set, and then MLS, one set of ideas, and MLS just kind of grabbed them and said, we want something else. That was the business plan of MLS. And so MLS, once again, from my previous rant, had to choose arena. And the horrible reality is that no foreign coach will take what MLS is offering. No foreign coach wouldn't want to be depending on an MLS. Klinsmann had to play kind of nice with Gulati because Gulati brought him over and Klinsmann's an American. You bring in a foreign coach and it's pretty much you do it my way or I'm out. Nobody's going to listen to Merritt Paulson or Don Garber. You're not going to bring in a decent coach out of Europe and tell him what to do. And so you can bring in a lower tier coach and overpay him and hope he listens, but he probably won't. And this leaves U.S. in a conundrum because American coaches that come out of MLS are not good enough. American players that come out of MLS are not good enough. And MLS, in its infinite wisdom, keeps the players from being good enough. It keeps players from going to Europe and improving their skills. Now, some like Pulisic, or Wright, or there McKinney. There are a few guys who are in Germany or Europe. Either they have citizenship or they have some previous experience in Europe, or they have family connections. But for the most part, they're kept in the United States. They're not moving, they're staying. And the league, even though it's improving, listen, I watched some MLS accidentally recently, and the quality of play was a lot better. I mean, tons and tons and tons better than it was before. But it's still not great. Look at who the top scorers are. It's Bradley Wright Phillips, who's basically a League One. It's a third English tier reject. He had one good year in League One. He couldn't hack it in the championship. You have Nemanja Nikolic, who was a good player in Poland, which is like in the 20s. And you had 35-year-old Robbie Keane, who was leading the league. These are the best players in MLS. And the players who couldn't score in Greece are the best players in MLS. And that sets the standard. That says who can play and who can't play. And of course, it's not unusual because that's the salary MLS pays. It pays famous players who are over the hill, except Jovinto. That guy can still ball. And so when we bring in up the coach, who will the next coach select? A lot of the German-born American kids, the Fabian Johnson, and they're looking at Arena probably thinking, this guy doesn't know, his chessboard from a hole in the ground. So they're lukewarm, and all the guy has to say, listen, Timothy Chandler or Terrence Boyd or Aaron Johansson, all you have to do is to say, you know what, I'm nursing an injury. I have a little knock. I can't appear. I can't show up. So if you turn the European players against American coaches, now you pretty much have to call everyone from MLS who's anyone. And it means they're going to have really hard time performing even at this miserly CONCACAF level. Why? Because MLS teams stuck, who have now, or they're like 50%, 70% stuff with foreign players. I mean, if you look at like Portland's in Chicago, they have a lot of foreign players. Even they don't do all that well in Mexico. Historically, of course, they've done horribly. And so you have players who are not suitable for high-quality soccer, coaches who are not suitable for high-quality soccer. And the fantasy of the U.S. executives to be thinking that they can do something, they don't have to change a thing. I mean, that's insanity. But that's the PR move. That's what they're trying to do. They try to sell you the steak or the sizzle. Well, they try to sell you the steak at much higher value than the higher price of the value warrants. And that's a real problem. That's a real bleeping problem. The U.S. soccer has entered a previously unknown territory. Up to now, it was rising. It was improving. Players were going to Europe. They were trying to catch up with better teams like Dempsey hooked up with Tottenham, and Donovan went to Bayern and to Everton. And those are pretty good teams. Now there is, Jeff Cameron at Stoke. Jim Cameron? Yeah, well, that's a real avatar. And so what happens? What happens? Foreign players may not like American coaches, and all you can choose then is American players. And now you're back to 1990. Minor league. Well, okay, MLS is a lot better than A League was in those years. But if they're going to stick with American coaches, while other teams in CONCACAF, Panama has a Colombian coach, Honduras has a Colombian coach, Mexico has a Colombian coach. Do you see the pattern here? Do you see the pattern? The pattern is that you need a Colombian coach. Okay, you might need a Colombian coach, but you need somebody who's better than an American coach. And those coaches may not be coming. And that means a downward spiral, and a horrible one at that.